Okay, my name is Tal. I'm from Collider Ventures, the general counsel in Collider Ventures, and we're going to speak today about regulation. I know regulation is boring, but this is a different discussion. We're going to speak about how regulation can improve our product, okay, for people who build product on Web3. And I know it's like a little bit difficult to think about regulation. There are many rules, many jurisdiction, and we will try to give you practical information for people that actually building products in Web3. So I introduced the professional panelists I have today. Chen from Solidus Labs, which basically helps companies to be more compliant in this space. We have Nir from the Web3 and Crypto Forum, which has a vast experience working with regulators and parliament members, and Miran, the Associate General Counsel in Fireblocks, with a lot of experience with working in financial institutions, fintech companies, and also Bank of Israel. So for the people who don't really familiar with like the regulatory framework, why don't we just give like a very short background on what is regulation in Web3, and maybe Miran can start with that.
Of course, let the lawyer lead the regulation. Okay, so basically, I think that first, I was actually thinking about it, and we first need to discuss the classification of Web3. What is Web3? I think this is one of the biggest challenges. I cannot define Web3 since it varies from jurisdiction to the other, but what I can tell you is that there are a few fundamentals that design Web3. One of them is decentralization, permissionlessness, and trustfulness, which means that the Web3 is going to rely on incentives rather than third parties. Now, some of the regulatory matters that are connected to Web3 are basically not new and not indicative. They concerning open source, IP, and consumer protection. But essentially, when we're speaking about Web3 and what is more indicative or special for Web3 is the fact that it creates an open economy that allows money value to move across jurisdiction, which can have like legal implication that has to do with payments, that has to do with money transmission, that also varies from one jurisdiction to the other. This is something that is essential and should be taken into account when establishing a product. Again, this is a very complicated topic to just touch on it, because essentially it has to do if the product is, if the company touches the funds or not, if you're in the money flow or not. And it actually also provides potentially a greater ownership for users. And also, it's coupled with convertible digital asset, which can bear their own regulatory implication. So also something to be mindful on, since it's also a very complicated ecosystem to navigate. Digital assets, currently they're regulated in some jurisdictions, and the references to it changes increasingly between jurisdiction to the other. We can see MiCA. I think there's also a very interesting panel today on MiCA. We can see that in the US, the UK, that addresses it differently. And I think that one thing that is essential and could be applicable to most products are AML and terrorism financing. So I think this is something to be very mindful on. And the reason I'm also mentioned that this is essential because it has a criminal scent. So it can very, very severe implications. So this is my 2 cents, just, you know, as a general framework and overview.
Okay, that's good, I think. And it's good about like the criminal offense, and we're not trying to scare anyone, but we need to take seriously this issue because it's serious.
Yeah, I don't think it's about creating fear. I think that we need to acknowledge that regulation is important and it's a proven tool. The thing is about balancing regulation and balancing it vis-a-vis ideals that we have from decentralization, like shadow anonymity and others. So it's all about balance, and it's all about, enabling innovation and finding a framework which will be fit for purpose. But regulation is not scary. Regulation helps us mitigate risk, as we've seen recently with the FTX case. So this is not a cliche, it's a mechanism which can be, if implemented correctly, can be very helpful for us.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when I think about like the next question is, let's say I have a decentralized protocol. I'm not a custodian. I just write a smart contract, deployed it on Ethereum. I even don't have a token. Okay, so like I'm not in any like regulatory specific area. So the question is, do I have anything to do with regulation? Like, should I do anything with that, or just I'm decentralized? I don't really care.
So,
and then
would you like to go first?
No, I can take it afterwards.
Okay. So I have a growing list I'm keeping of the original sins of the crypto and Web3 industry, and one of them is this antagonistic approach to regulation. Regulation is the enemy. Regulation is something that shouldn't exist. It's it doesn't belong here. The short answer to your question is yes. No matter what you do, put Web3 aside for a second. No matter what you do, regulation has implication. The amount of people that were allowed to be in this conference, the way these chairs were designed, the sidewalks you walked on here, everything is regulated to some degree because it benefits society. And we all kind of abide by these laws. So I just want to say that it's like the fact even that we're a little careful and kind of sensitive when we say the word regulation in a Web3 conference is in and on itself a challenge for the industry. Solidus, we're a lot of Israelis, the company is American. We work almost everywhere we go. It's a trivial thing that Web3 has to figure out its relationship with regulation. Entities like Uniswap Labs, right? Perhaps the flagship for DEXs, right? Have a huge regulatory team, right? It's not and they're passionate about it. Just to say, whatever you do, no matter what you do, and definitely if you deal with funds, or let's even make it broader, the transfer of value, you have to think about regulation. We, Solidus, started by working mostly with CeFi platforms. We specialize, by the way, within compliance in preventing market manipulation, things like wash trading, spoofing. Gradually, we started also working directly with regulators and increasingly with protocols and decentralized entities. And I think it's fair to say that when it comes to CeFi, at the end of the day, it's an attempt to take decentralized assets and imitate as much as possible the way their assets are traded in traditional finance, right? So in that sense, taking traditional regulation and trying to apply it to crypto trading. The Web3 world, DeFi, is a regulatory blue ocean to a large degree. It's much less clear for regulators there. On the one hand, it's much less clear how to regulate it, and it's very clear that it will require different approaches. It's not clear what those are yet, and there's a really fascinating ongoing joint effort between those entities like Uniswap, DYDX, many of them are our clients, companies like us that helps mitigate those risks and the regulatory requirements, and regulators to define that. And it's a fascinating process. But the bottom line is, if you ask me, at the end of the day, if you think about the grand vision of Web3, a lot of services that have underlying token economics, those can be manipulated. That can affect the services. Whatever you do, you want to think about regulation, and you want to think about it early. It's gonna, obviously each use case requires a specific approach, but I'll kind of echo Moran here. Specifically, if you're dealing with money, with funds, with value, with something that can be used to launder money, which is essentially any transfer of value, you have to think about it, and you have to think about it early.
So first of all, we're using those microphones in order not for you to hear us, but for the camera to hear us. So we look a bit weird, but it's fine. We know what we're doing.
I thought it was just for the mic drop at the end.
Yeah. No, but I want to say something that's going to be a little bit unpopular, from an entrepreneur point of view, regulation sucks. Really, it's something that you like. You sit around in your room, you write a code, you start running it, and it's marvelous. The technology works and everything, and then suddenly somebody comes and say, "Well, you can't do this," and that one exposes you, and this one. And I think this is something that is very special to Web3. Why? Because in the core value of Web3, think about it. Like in Web2, we used to move bits and bytes from one point to another, but in Web3, we move value from one point to another. Now, when entrepreneurs start thinking about it, and we're always thinking about it, and we're saying, okay, so we have a choice. Like one side of the road is, well, you know, I'm just coding here, so don't mind me. And if I'm going to be incorporated, then I'm going to be incorporated in somewhere with a mailbox in the Bahamas or something like that. And there is this other road that says, well, okay, so I'm going to dive into the regulation and I'm going to sometime drown in it because I won't have enough to surface. And I think what we're trying to, and now for the part that I'm saying that what we're doing, but I'm going to keep it short. What we've done in the Israeli Crypto Companies Forum is say something like that. Well, listen, nobody can carry the regulatory burden. It's a burden by itself. Nobody can do it. No company can do it by itself. So what we're trying to do is, in Hebrew you call it le'agem. We're linking everybody. We're trying to link everybody, and we're approaching the regulation as a whole industry. And when we're going to the regulatory, to the tax authority, to the Israeli SEC, to the regulators themselves, to the parliament members, to the ministers, we're coming as an industry because nobody actually needs to change the law. You just need it to fit to your purposes. Now, if I have one message that I would like to overlay here, is that guys, keep on building. Keep on, move fast, break things, and don't be shrunk in your seats by us telling you, well, you need to think about regulation, build stuff. But I think that there is one more, golden advice that I should urge you to go to. Let me have a show of hands for a minute. How many of you are Israelis? Oh, we have a majority of Israelis here. So if you're Israeli, then you have the Crypto Companies Forum. If you're American, you have the Blockchain Association. You have a lot of communities that are targeting regulation and trying to deal with it as a whole, as an industry. And I think this is one mechanism that will help you, because in order to see what's going on, in order to see what exposes you, you need to be a part of a group. No one company can deal with it by itself.
Okay. That's a very good message.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah, very short.
Sorry, very short. I just want to say, I have a friend. He's a former regulator. He does Galaxy's EU policy, and he says often that regulatory unclarity is a bummer for innovators, exactly like you said. But it's also a natural part of innovation. You can't know how to regulate something that hasn't existed before. It's also an opportunity to do the right thing. Thinking about regulation only as a burden, in my personal opinion, is not necessarily the right approach, because because it's also about doing the right thing. It's about making sure your users are protected, and being ethical. So don't think about it just because of the punish you might get, but also because it's the way to adoption.
Okay.
Sorry, I did my best to be short.
Can I have my 2 cents? Sorry.
No, I didn't let near, so I probably.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know.
I'm gonna, for me around, it's fine.
I'll finish. I like to.
Okay.
No, just a second. I'll I'll go for next question, then you can answer what.
Then we'll answer this one like the proper politician.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So.
But I did want to add something on
Okay.
that. I don't think that anyone can afford today to be regulatory agnostic, because at the end of the day, we operate in an ecosystem, and even if you're protocol and you're not in the money flow and you're not falling under the regulatory parameter, I think that at the end of the day, you're offering services that has a synergy with financial market that has some connection. So I think you should be aware of regulation at least. For instance, us in Fireblocks, we're unregulated, but we swim and we have a full knowledge of regulation and the ecosystem that we work. So I don't think that gives the benefit of the doubt, because in a sense, that will keep us isolated from the ecosystem. It means we're non-custodial. We do not fall under regulation. We do not need a license in order to operate. We do not fall into the regulatory parameter. We're not in the, like in traditional finance, you distinguish between entities that touches the funds and not touching the funds. In digital, it's a little bit complicated, but at the end of the day, we do not need a license in order to operate. We're a software company. Okay.
I just want to add one more thing. I think it's a burden, but when you're an engineer and you're building a bridge, the standards are a burden, because you need to go through all those drawings and see that it won't work, and see that it won't break and it won't fail. And I think that this is where the silver lining goes, because unlike other developers, when we're building on Web3, we're building some sort of a bridge. So we have responsibility for the people who are transferring funds through our systems. And this is what makes the big difference, that sometimes requires supervision, but still it's not fun.
I think I need to regulate the panelists before. But I think we all agree that regulations following regulations bring trust, and this is what we want our platform to follow, and users care about the trust of the platform. So that's why, even if we are not obligated to follow certain rules, we want to create this trust when we work on our products. And I promise to give you practical information. So if I'm working on a Web3 product, something decentralized, and I still want to be compliant with some regulations, maybe KYC AML, to make sure that dirty money is not flowing in my platform. What can I do? Which tools I have? Of course, not expensive, because I'm in an early stage product. But what can I use?
So it very much depends on the use case, but I think, again, echoing Miran, I hope you don't mind, I keep on piggybacking on your points. But look, and you also referred to the possibility that money that comes from, child labor or illicit activities, financial terrorism, etc., would go through your platform, whether it is centralized or not. I mean, forget about the regulation for a second. Do you want that? Probably not. So regardless of regulation, having the ability to understand where money comes from and know how to attribute it to wrong addresses is really, really important. So transaction monitoring, there are great on-chain analytics firms out there. They're not very expensive solutions, definitely not for smaller companies. And I would recommend at the very least learning about it very early. If you're facilitating any form of trading, you have to also think about market surveillance. Those are solutions like the ones we provide. They are heavier, but again, there are crypto native options. We founded our company because we knew that legacy market surveillance solutions that work for TradFi cost millions a year, and that's not going to work for the crypto economy. So I'll say, first of all, make sure you have a way of understanding that you're not facilitating illicit funds. That's anti-money laundering. Putting aside KYC for a second, because I know it's a bit more controversial, and then specifically for facilitating trading activity, whether it's your own token or just assets, having a form of market surveillance to prevent, or at least know when market manipulation is available, or at least show a regulator that you're monitoring for it, is very, very important. And there are affordable ways and companies that are friendly to startups and are crypto natives that can help you do that. We're one of them, but there are also others.
I think that just to add on top of what you said, I think that companies can tackle it in both angles. First, depends on the regulatory and legal implications. So if we're looking at legal implications such as IP, I think that we have a good opportunity to utilize the technology, basically, to utilize smart contracts in order to automate licensing and protect our IP in a better way. We can use the blockchain the proof records of using in the blockchain to actually record our IP, which is important. And I also think that if there are some regulatory requirements, companies can try to implement it by themselves. For instance, KYC and AML is a very good example. But they can also utilize a third-party solution that will afford them maybe, some agnostic protocol that will connect and allow them some seamless dashboard to help their compliance team. So I really think it depends on the use case and which kind of risk we need to tackle. But I think that there's a lot of possibilities to go about it.
Yeah, I will add that taking a good lawyer, like even for a few hours, that can be very.
That's always there.
That's always good to understand the
Keeps
framework.
us,
No, I'm saying really like to understand what is the framework that you're working in. You don't have to pay a lot of money just to understand the risks and exposures.
Still, and I think that, and I might repeat the last topic that I was talking about, but I think that joining an association, a local association that can tell you more about the regulatory framework at your geographical territory, and joining your peers and finding out what you need to do is something that you should do. When you're talking about taking a good lawyer, we're sometimes tackling this thing. It's like you're going to this lawyer, and he or she's like, yeah, we know everything. We can tell you everything about it. It's $400 an hour, and boy, that's gonna take a lot of hours. And there's a lot of material out there, and you need somebody to make it accessible, especially the first stages of your company. And it needs to be something affordable, at least at the first stages. And a lot of forums like us have those kind of plans that if you're an early stage, you can join for free, or for for small sums of something that is very partial, but that thing can give you enough information to go about and to get started with.
Okay, I had a few more questions, but I want to open it for questions from the audience. So, yeah.
So you mentioned earlier on about how companies should come together to work together to regulation. That's a good idea in theory, but my issue with that is always I feel like companies have different self-interest. So you saw in the US where Binance and Coinbase formed a lobbyist group, and then it fell apart because they have different self-interest. So in the alternative, you have companies like, let's say, FTX that lobbies on their own behalf, but then they just have preferential laws. So my question to you is what's your advice on getting companies to work together towards a common goal, even though they have different self-interest?
So first of all, it's a great question, because we actually dealt with that same issue when we started the forum. The problem is that every company has its own interest. And as you said, when somebody has its own interest, they're pulling weight to somewhere. And this is not good for an industry as a whole. So the way that we solve it is by something that you all might know is a sort of a consensus mechanism. Okay? So Companies Forum in Israel has about 19 companies, and we decided a consensus, meaning that every document, every bill, everything that goes through the forum is something that is being made in a consensus, meaning that if somebody, it's like, a consensus like at the Bitcoin network, okay? So if you have 80% of people who are saying, okay, this is fine, then you're going about and if somebody has a problem with what we're doing, we're actually stopping and seeing if this might hurt somebody, and sometimes we put aside stuff that we think that are in controversy, okay? Because I think that in most cases the interests are aligned between the companies in the industry, and the things that are not aligned, there's so much to handle now that we need to that we need to put this on the side. And I think that a major problem with the FTX implosion is that we actually saw a major lobbying effort that actually not only went down the drain, but it actually harmed a lot of parts of the industry, and it tainted everything that we're doing. This is why we need a balance when we're talking about those kind of organizations of those kind of form. We need a balance between the members, and we need to work in a consensus and not to go controversial.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right that companies have their own interest. We all want to win, but we also have a lot of very big joint interests. I think it's very clear now that there are problems that cannot be solved for this industry without all of us working together and working together with regulators. I can tell you from personal experience that about 4 years ago, we were looking to launch not an association. We do not want to compete with you in no way, but the community of interest of crypto exchanges that are and platforms that are very focused on preventing market manipulation. We as a technical solution, are neutral because we don't compete with any of them. 4 years ago, it was harder. People didn't want to do it. And now we have 42 members on it, including many competitors, and you mentioned some of them earlier, Coinbase, BitMEX, Bittrex, etc. At the end of the day, it's about finding the things that, we cannot solve on our own, that are joint interests. It's about increasing the pie for everyone. So obviously it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that smart facilitators, like my co-panelist here, have already solved to a large degree. There are always going to be, ones that are driven by one company. Usually, in my opinion, they're not going to work in the long run.
Okay, next question.
Thank you. Geographically speaking, where are the most advanced regulatory markets, and which ones are coming up? From an entrepreneur point of view, who wants to set up an entity?
Well, it depends on which angle are you focused. Are you referring to digital assets specifically? So currently there are a few legislation that are pending. There's an holistic framework in Europe, the Digital Finance Package, that includes MiCA, Marketing Crypto Assets, DORA, the Resilience Act, and the DLT pilot. In the UK, there are also upcoming legislation that should create a very holistic framework, because MiCA is very much focused on stablecoin, and the UK is trying to regulate it in a more holistic way and not just capture stable coins. I think that the US is an interesting patchwork. It's still very much focused on taxonomy, but it is something to look into because of how big it is and how important it is from an economic perspective. I would look into Europe specifically currently. I think it's pretty advanced, and it's going to pioneer, at least in the stable coin. And I think since it's a developed economy, I would assume that a lot of other jurisdictions would follow maybe some of the framework that it presents. If in other aspects, Asia, I would look. I know that there's some pending legislation. Singapore is very much focused on payments. Really, it depends on where we want to tackle it. I mean, Australia is also very interesting. It's not regulated because it lets innovation lead it, but it's very advanced in terms of CBDC. So it really depends on where you put the spotlight at the end of the day. Yeah. Anyone else?
I thought that was very comprehensive, and I agree with everything. I'll just say there's sometimes a tendency to think that where regulation is less, like let's call it like a little less evolved, less stringent, it's necessarily a better place to innovate. I don't think that's true. It's actually, in a lot of ways, it's often better for innovators. It's more challenging because you have to already comply with regulation, but you have better guidelines, etc. So look for places that are more developed. Beyond that, I would just say, first of all, I think we all should say, we haven't said it yet, right? None of this should be considered legal advice. You should do your own research. It really depends on your use case, and no one can decide, no one can tell you for sure what's best for your business and and your use case. I'll just mention a few other jurisdictions that I think are interesting. The UAE. Specifically Abu Dhabi, ADGM, have some very interesting already, specifically about DeFi and Web3, things that are being proposed. I can tell you they already have systems they're acquiring from companies like us, etc. So I'll just mention them as well. I agree with your point about going with some of the bigger developed economies, but there are places where there are very advanced specific regulation that you might not necessarily think about.
Last point about this is if you plan to live in Israel, so you still have Israeli consequences. They talked about this in the last panel, but taxes probably will be Israeli. If you're selling tokens to Israeli, so Israeli laws applies. And if you want to disconnect, to be disconnected from Israel, you probably need to move out from Israel.
Depends on your offering, and if it's your offer to offshore, there's a lot of implication at the end.
But at least from taxes, you need to really go out from Israel.
Also keep in mind that it does, you can be regulated in one place, but if you're serving clients or users in another place, then, at the end of the day, the regulator there, can come and ask you questions, right? So it's a very complex question that requires deep thinking on, and it should be an integral part of in my opinion, of any crypto, DeFi, Web3 company's strategy, because it's the path to adoption. And it's a competitive advantage if you have a smart strategy there.
Okay. More questions? Okay. Yeah.
So, are you guys seeing? Sorry. So, in terms of regulations, there has been in the past certain jurisdictions, such as the infrastructure bill, I think of 2021 in the USA. Where there wasn't a strong differentiation between custodian tools and non-custodian tools. Do you guys see most of the jurisdictions in the world starting to see that difference and actually making different rules according whether it's a custodial tool or a non-custodial tool?
So first of all, I think the FTX implosion had put a spotlight on those issues. I think first of all that we see in Israel, Israel too has an infrastructure bill, and we see that that regulation is coming about, especially when we're talking about centralized about CeFi. I think that one thing that we need to know is that regulators actually don't differentiate sometimes. They think that they know what DeFi is. My co-founder, Shauli Rajuan, who co-founded the forum, said once that who founded the forum with me. He said once that a lot of regulators don't know that when they're transferring funds, they're transferring tokens from one wallet address to another on the Ethereum network, they don't know that they have to have Ethereum for it, and they have to have Ether for it, and it's common knowledge for all of us, but they have no idea. So when we're talking about the difference between DeFi and CeFi, and we're talking about trying to oversee what happens on those arenas, this is something that I think they know what they're talking about, but they actually don't. But what I have to say about it is two more things. First of all, we should all read what Coinbase's Brian Armstrong wrote. He said that CeFi actors should be regulated as hard as governments can, and we need to let DeFi and we need to let innovation run in DeFi. This is one thing that we need to know. And the other thing that we need to know is that sometimes technology is being shaped and territories around the globe are not actually putting rules on. If we're talking about DAOs, let's say, I think that most advanced countries in the world are on these days having committees about how they define DAOs, how to regulate DAOs, because we actually don't really know what that means. So I think that we'll need to wait a little bit longer to see how technology shapes.
Okay. We need to finish, but for you, the next lecture would be, the next panel will be very relevant about Mika. I think we all agree that regulation is important, create trust, and even if you are decentralized, it doesn't mean that you don't have to comply with regulations.
Do I have time to say one thing? I think it's also important to say, in relation to your question, but in general, don't think about, like, we think about again, we're talking about it as a as a burden, etc., etc. Regulation is at the end of the day about people. Custodial, non-custodial, at the end of the day, if you facilitated something that hurt people or hurt financial stability, and through that hurt people, regulators are probably going to get to you. That's in my experience how they think about it. I actually found in my conversation in Congress a month ago, a lot of regulators told me we're putting this bill forward, but we're not going to include DeFi in it because we need to understand it better. You know what's the one thing that's going to make them very hastily put in regulation in place? If a lot of people get hurt. And by the way, regulators are human beings. You can go and talk to them. I actually recommend, you don't need to wait to have a lawyer to go and talk to a regulator. Actually, most regulators would prefer to talk to you as an innovator directly, not through a mouthpiece. Not necessarily through a facilitator. But also find the right translator in order to have those conversations. Like, of course, Meran here, I think, is a great example.
I just want to.
Oh my gosh, we're unruly, huh?
I don't know what to do with you guys.
Because I would like to take advantage. So, as Tal mentioned, I've been working before Fireblocks at the central bank. So basically, I'm coming from the regulator. And I think that something that is important to all of us, like democracy, we need to participate in creating a conversation also with the regulator and letting the regulator understand what is the technology about, what is the solution, and what is the product. Not just sit in the back and waiting for them to do the work, because they see other objectives to their regulation. So I think it's something that all of us need in order to promote better regulation that will better suit our need and will implicate and will have implication to all of us. So this is my 2 cents.
Thank you very much.